The soft glow of candlelight flickered across the table, casting warm shadows that danced on the walls of the cozy restaurant. It was our 5th wedding anniversary, and as I looked into Mark's eyes, I felt a swell of affection. He smiled at me, his dark hair slightly tousled, and I couldn't help but reminisce about our journey together. "Can you believe it's been 5 years?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark chuckled, leaning back in his chair. 5 years, 3 house moves, and 2 dogs. Not to mention that time we got lost in Paris. I laughed, recalling the way we had wandered the streets, hand in hand, getting lost in the beauty of the city rather than worrying about finding our way. "I think that was my favorite trip," I said, my heart fluttering at the memory. Just then, Jake walked in, his tall frame and easy grin lighting up the room. "I hope I'm not interrupting a romantic moment," he teased, plopping down into the seat beside me. "Not at all," I replied, feeling a wave of comfort wash over me. Jake had been Mark's best friend since college, always a part of our lives. He fit seamlessly into our little family, and tonight was no different. The 3 of us chatted and laughed as we shared stories over a delicious meal. Wine flowed freely, and the atmosphere felt light. Yet, beneath the surface, I sensed an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't quite place. Jake's gaze lingered on me a moment longer than usual, but I brushed it off, attributing my discomfort to the wine. As the evening wore on, we toasted to love and friendship. "To us," Mark said, raising his glass, "and to many more years of happiness." "To us," Jake echoed, but his eyes were fixed on me, a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher in his expression. Later that night, back at home, the warmth of the restaurant felt like a distant memory. I wandered into our bedroom, the silence enveloping me. Mark was in the living room, laughing at some late-night show, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As I began to unwind, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My reflection stared back, and I felt a wave of unease wash over me. Was it just the wine, or was there something more to the way Jake had looked at me? I shook my head, dismissing the thoughts as paranoia. Mark and I were happy. At least I thought we were. The next day dawned brighter than I expected. The sun streamed through the curtains, and I felt optimistic as I prepared for a party we were invited to that evening. I took my time getting ready, choosing a dress that hugged my curves just right. It was a simple but elegant outfit that I hoped would make Mark smile. In the midst of curling my hair, I heard a knock on the bathroom door. "Sarah, you almost ready?" Mark called from the other side. "Just a minute," I replied, focused on my reflection. Suddenly, the door swung open, and in stepped Jake, his eyes wide with surprise. "Oh, sorry, I thought—" Before I could react, the door clicked shut behind him. "Jake, what are you doing in here?" "I didn't mean to walk in on you," he stammered, his face flushing. "I thought you were still in the bedroom." "Can you please step out?" I asked, feeling a mix of embarrassment and amusement. Right, he said, but he didn't move. Instead, he looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "You look beautiful, by the way." The compliment hung in the air, thick with tension. I felt a flutter of something in my chest, but I quickly dismissed it. "Thank you, but seriously, you need to go." As he opened the door, I felt a jolt of electricity between us, a moment that felt charged with unspoken words. I brushed it off, attributing it to the awkwardness of the situation. But deep down, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something had shifted in our dynamic. "Let's not tell Mark about this, okay?" he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Of course," I replied, though uncertainty gnawed at me. I finished getting ready, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. The evening loomed ahead, and I could only wonder how it would unfold. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring blankly at the wall. The memory of that moment in the bathroom with Jake replayed in my mind like a broken record, each cycle more agonizing than the last. How could I let it come to that? My heart raced with guilt, scrambling to reconcile my feelings for Mark with this new, confusing dynamic. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath me, and I was terrified of what lay below. "Sarah, are you okay?" Mark's voice broke through my thoughts, pulling me back into the present. He stood in the doorway, concern etched across his face. I forced a smile, but it felt brittle, like a thin layer of ice over an unfathomable depth. "Yeah, just lost in thought," I replied, my voice wavering slightly. I couldn't tell him. I wouldn't. The idea of ruining our friendship with Jake, of shattering the world we had built together, was too much to bear. "Do you want to talk about it?" Mark stepped closer, his presence warm and grounding. He always had a way of making me feel safe, like nothing could touch us as long as we were together. But now, I felt like an imposter in my own life. "No, really, it's nothing," I said, forcing myself to look him in the eyes, searching for reassurance in the depths of his gaze. "Just work stuff." He nodded, though I could see the concern still flickering in his eyes. "All right, just know I'm here if you need anything." With that, he turned to leave, and I felt the weight of my secret pressing down on me harder than ever. How could I betray his trust? The thought gnawed at me, yet the memory of Jake's gaze, the intensity, the undeniable chemistry, kept pulling me back into that moment. At the party later that night, I tried to mask my turmoil with laughter and conversation. Friends mingled, drinks flowed, and the music pulsed through the air. But all I could think about was Jake. I caught glimpses of him across the room, his eyes lingering on me, and a shiver ran down my spine. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. "Sarah, come join us," a friend called, pulling me from my reverie. I plastered a smile on my face, forcing myself to engage, but my heart wasn't in it. I felt like I was wearing a mask, and underneath it was a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. "Where's Mark?" Jake suddenly appeared beside me, his voice low and slightly teasing. "He's around," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Just chatting with some of our friends." "Good," he said, leaning in a little too close for comfort. I could smell his cologne, a mix of sandalwood and something spicy, and it made my stomach flutter. "I wanted to see how you were doing after, you know." My heart raced. "I'm fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Really?" He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to pretend with me, Sarah. I know it's hard." His words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. I wanted to scream at him to stop, to remind him of the line we had crossed, the boundary we couldn't unsee. But instead, I found myself whispering, "What do you want from me, Jake?" He smirked, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "I just want to talk, that's all." A shiver of dread ran through me. I knew that conversation would lead to nothing good. "We shouldn't," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's complicated." "Complicated can be exciting," he replied, a challenge lacing his tone. I wanted to argue, to remind him of everything I had with Mark. But the thrill of Jake's attention made my resolve weaken. I glanced around, searching for Mark, but he was lost in the crowd, oblivious to the tension building between me and his best friend. As the night wore on, I felt more and more like a puppet caught in a tangled web. Every glance from Jake ignited something within me that I had thought was long buried. I was spiraling, and I didn't know how to stop. When I finally got home, I immediately grabbed my phone, my heart pounding as I saw Jake's name flash on the screen. My stomach dropped. He had sent a text. "We need to talk about what happened. Alone." I stared at the message, my mind racing. What did I want? What did I really want? The gravity of the situation settled over me like a heavy blanket, stifling and suffocating. I had to make a choice, but I felt trapped between two worlds, neither of which seemed secure anymore. As I sat across from Emily in our favorite cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the crisp autumn air. I felt a storm brewing inside me, a whirlwind of confusion and guilt that I desperately needed to share. "Emily, I don't even know how to start," I stammered, fidgeting with my cup. "Just tell me what's going on, Sarah," she urged, her eyes locking onto mine with that familiar intensity that always made me feel like I could spill my secrets without fear of judgment. Taking a deep breath, I plunged into the chaotic events of the past few days. "It's about Jake," I began, my heart racing at the mere mention of his name. "Something happened between us." Emily leaned in, her expression shifting from concern to shock. "What do you mean, something happened?" I glanced around the cafe, suddenly feeling exposed, as if the walls themselves were eavesdropping. "We got locked in the bathroom together, just the two of us, and things got complicated. He made a move, Emily. I didn't know how to react." "Did you kiss him?" she asked bluntly, her voice low but firm. "No. Well, not exactly. I mean, I didn't kiss him, but—" My voice trailed off as I struggled to articulate the tension that had sparked between us. He was so close, and I felt this pull toward him. I've never felt anything like that before. And now, I can't stop thinking about it. Emily shook her head, her demeanor shifting to one of concern. "Sarah, you have to be careful. This is dangerous territory. You love Mark. You've built a life together." "I know!" I nearly shouted, frustration bubbling to the surface. But then there's this part of me that's curious about Jake. It's like he's igniting something in me that I didn't even know was there. I buried my face in my hands, feeling the weight of my own turmoil. I feel so guilty even thinking about it. Emily reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "You need to be honest with yourself, Sarah. If you're feeling this way, it's a sign. But crossing that line could ruin everything. You have to think about the consequences." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. I had always prided myself on being loyal, on nurturing my marriage. But here I was, teetering on the edge of something I never wanted to consider. What if I'm just bored? What if I'm craving excitement that I don't have with Mark anymore? Or what if it's more than that? What if you're unhappy but don't want to admit it? Emily pressed, her tone gentle yet probing. I sighed, staring into my cup as if it held the answers to my questions. "I don't know, Em. I just feel so torn. And Jake, he's always been there, you know. He knows me in ways I don't think Mark does. Sarah, you need to meet with Jake and talk about this. Set some boundaries. You can't let it fester," she advised, her voice steady. Against my better judgment, I nodded. Later that day, I found myself standing in front of Jake's apartment, my heart racing. The moment he opened the door, I was hit by a wave of familiarity that made me feel both comforted and terrified. He ushered me inside, and just like that, the air shifted. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice smooth as ever. "I'm glad you came." "Yeah, well, we need to talk," I replied, forcing confidence into my tone. Jake leaned against the counter, arms crossed, an easy smirk playing on his lips. "About what happened the other night?" I swallowed hard, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. We can't pretend it didn't happen, Jake. I can't. I love Mark, but I can't shake this feeling between us. He stepped closer, the distance between us shrinking. I get it. You're in a tough spot. But don't you ever think about what it would be like if you weren't? If you could just let go? I felt my resolve wavering as his words sank in. What do you mean? He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. Sarah, you deserve to feel alive. Mark loves you, but does he really see you? The real you? I do. I've always seen you. His gaze bore into mine, and for a moment I found myself lost in the depths of his sincerity. But then guilt washed over me, a tidal wave crashing down. Jake, I can't do this. I can't betray Mark. Then why are you here? He challenged softly, his expression earnest. You're here because you feel it too. What we have is real, Sarah. The conflict within me raged like a tempest, and I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I was standing at a precipice, and I could either step back into the safety of my marriage or leap into the unknown with Jake. As I drove home, my mind spiraled. Mark was waiting for me with a romantic dinner, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. The guilt clawed at my insides, making me question everything. I pulled into the driveway, the weight of my choices pressing down as I stepped inside our home, a place that suddenly felt foreign. Hey, you're home, Mark called from the kitchen, his voice warm and inviting. The sight of him, bustling about with a smile on his face, made my heart ache with guilt. Yeah, I'm here, I replied, my voice barely a whisper. As I walked into the kitchen, the delicious aroma of his cooking enveloped me, but all I could feel was the conflict churning in my gut. I wanted to tell him everything, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I forced a smile, hoping it could mask the turmoil inside, but I knew it wouldn't last long. The days that followed my accidental encounter with Jake felt like a whirlwind, each moment infused with tension and unspoken words. I found myself in a constant state of unease as I navigated the familiar contours of my life, yet everything felt altered. My interactions with Jake became more frequent, like secret rendezvous tucked within the fabric of my everyday existence. Each stolen glance, each fleeting touch sent shivers down my spine, igniting a fire I didn't know existed. One Thursday afternoon, while Mark was out running errands, I found myself in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air, but my mind was elsewhere. The doorbell rang, and my heart raced as I opened the door to find Jake standing there, an easy smile gracing his face. Hey, I thought I'd drop by, he said casually, stepping inside. I felt a mix of excitement and dread as he entered, his presence instantly changing the atmosphere of my home. Mark isn't here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He went to get groceries. Perfect, Jake replied, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Just us then. There was an intensity in his gaze that made my stomach flip. I led him to the living room, and we settled onto the couch, the space between us charged with an electric tension. As we talked about mundane things, work, the weather, I could feel the weight of our unspoken connection hanging in the air. Sarah, he said suddenly, his tone shifting. Can we talk about what happened in the bathroom? My breath caught in my throat. I thought we agreed to forget about it, I replied, my heart pounding. I can't forget, he confessed, leaning closer. I've thought about it every day since. About you. I felt a rush of heat rise to my cheeks. Jake, Just hear me out, he interrupted, his voice low and earnest. I know it's complicated, but I can't pretend anymore. I care about you, Sarah. more than I should." His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, but beneath it lay a chilling truth. I was married to Mark, the man I had promised to love and cherish. Yet here I was, caught in a web of temptation. "Jake, this isn't right," I whispered, my voice trembling. "We can't do this," he sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. I've seen the way you look at me, the way you feel. You can't deny that there's something between us." I looked away, grappling with my emotions. "What about Mark?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake's expression hardened. "What about him? You're not happy, are you? Don't you deserve more?" His words struck a nerve. I was unhappy, but I didn't know if that justified what we were discussing. The room felt small, the air thick with unspoken desires and fears. "I need to think," I finally said, standing up abruptly. Jake reached out, grabbing my wrist gently. "Please don't shut me out. Just consider it." I pulled away, my heart racing. "I can't," I said, my voice breaking. "I have to go." I rushed to the kitchen, trying to regain my composure. The clatter of dishes felt loud against the silence that followed. Jake lingered in the doorway, his presence suffocating me. "Sarah," he called softly. "I'm not trying to ruin your life. I just want you to be happy." I turned to face him, my mind a chaotic storm of emotions. "I don't know what makes me happy anymore," I admitted, tears brimming in my eyes. After a moment of silence, he stepped forward, his expression softening. "I'll give you time, but I won't give up on us." As he left, I felt a mixture of relief and despair wash over me. The door clicked shut behind him, and I sank to the floor, wrapping my arms around my knees. I had to confront my feelings, but how could I do that without tearing my entire world apart? The weekend loomed ahead, and I tried to focus on my relationship with Mark, but my heart was heavy with secrets, and the weight of my choices pressed down on me like a vice. As I lay in bed that night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering how I had arrived at this crossroads. It felt like a betrayal of everything I believed in, yet the thrill of Jake's confession echoed in my mind, taunting me with possibilities I had never dared to imagine. I resolved to talk to Mark about our relationship, to lay bare my frustrations and fears. But deep down, I feared the revelations that might come to light. I had no idea that Mark was hiding something of his own, a secret that could shatter the fragile foundation of everything I had ever known. As sleep eluded me, I couldn't shake the feeling that the next few days would change everything. I sat on the edge of our bed, the soft hum of the night wrapping around me like a cloak of uncertainty. My heart raced, each beat echoing the turmoil swirling in my mind. I couldn't shake the image of that text I had seen on Mark's phone. "Can't wait to see you again. You know what we talked about." It was a dagger to my chest, plunging deep into the trust I had placed in my husband. The air felt thick as I replayed the moment over and over in my head. Was I just paranoid? Or was Mark hiding something that could shatter our lives? With trembling hands, I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over Mark's contact. The urge to call him and demand answers was strong, but I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if I was just imagining things? I couldn't bear the thought of accusing him without proof. But as the silence of the room enveloped me, I felt the weight of my decision pressing down. Finally, I took a deep breath and decided to confront him. I marched into the living room where Mark was lounging on the couch, a casual smile on his face as he flicked through the channels on the TV. "Hey, babe," he said, glancing up at me. "What's up?" "Mark, we need to talk," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. He raised an eyebrow, the smile fading slightly. Sure. What's on your mind? I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. I saw a text on your phone earlier. It looked suspicious. His expression shifted, and I felt a flicker of panic in the pit of my stomach. What do you mean? What did it say? It was from someone named Lily. It mentioned something about seeing each other again, and some things you talked about. What does that mean? I demanded, my heart pounding. Mark shifted uncomfortably on the couch, his gaze dropping to the floor. Sarah, you must have misunderstood. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Mark. I know what I saw. I stepped closer, my frustration boiling over. This isn't just paranoia. I need you to be honest with me. He finally met my eyes, and I could see the tension etched in his features. It's not what you think. Lily is just a friend from work. We've been discussing a project, that's all. You're reading too much into this. Just a friend? My voice trembled as I fought back tears. I want to believe you, but why keep it a secret? Why didn't you tell me? Because it's a work thing. I didn't think it was important enough to mention, he snapped, frustration leaking into his tone. I stepped back, the distance between us feeling like a chasm. You're hiding something from me, and I can feel it. I don't even know who you are anymore. Maybe you should just trust me, he shot back, his voice rising. You're making a mountain out of a molehill, Sarah. The anger swelled within me, and I couldn't hold back the words any longer. And I can't trust you if you keep lying. I can't do this anymore. I turned on my heel, storming out of the living room, my heart pounding with rage and fear. I needed comfort, someone who understood the chaos in my mind. With shaky hands, I reached for my phone and texted Jake. Can we talk? I need to see you. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with his reply. Of course. Where? Just come over, I typed back, my heart racing at the thought of seeing him again. I didn't know what I was doing, but I felt like I was spiraling, desperate for clarity in a world that had turned upside down. When Jake arrived, I could feel the tension in the air. He stepped inside, concern etched on his face. What's going on, Sarah? He asked, his voice low and soothing. I couldn't hold back anymore. I poured out my heart, recounting the confrontation with Mark and the betrayal I felt. As I spoke, I felt the gravity of my choices weighing heavily on my shoulders. Sarah, I'm here for you, Jake said, stepping closer, his gaze intense. You deserve to be happy. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone. Before I knew it, I found myself leaning into him, my heart racing as our lips met in a passionate kiss. The world around us faded, and for those brief moments, I felt alive, free from the shackles of doubt and betrayal. But as quickly as it began, guilt washed over me like a cold wave. I pulled away, breathless and horrified at what I had just done. Jake, I can't, I murmured, stepping back as reality crashed over me. This is wrong. I'm married. I know, he said softly, his eyes filled with a mix of desire and understanding. But you're hurting, and I want to be here for you. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. I need to figure things out with Mark. I can't keep running to you. As I turned away, the weight of my choices felt heavier than ever. I could sense my marriage unraveling, and I knew I had to confront the truth before it was too late. But the thought of facing Mark again filled me with dread, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on a path leading to heartbreak, no matter which way I turned. I sat on the edge of our bed, heart pounding and mind racing, as I clutched my phone in my hand. Today was the day I would finally confront Mark about everything, the growing distance between us, the doubts that had crept into my mind like a thief in the night. I felt resolute, almost empowered, as I prepared to lay my heart bare. But just as I gathered the courage to stand up and face him, I heard voices coming from the living room. Curiosity piqued. I tiptoed down the hallway, my heart racing in my chest. I couldn't help but feel like I was about to uncover something monumental. Peering around the corner, I caught sight of Mark and Jake, both seated on the couch, their voices low, but the tension palpable. I strained to hear their conversation, my heart dropping as I caught snippets of their words. "I can't believe she fell for it," Jake said, his voice dripping with a mix of amusement and malice. "Just keep her close, but don't let her know," Mark replied, a smug tone lacing his voice. "She'll never suspect a thing. It's all going according to plan." Plan? My mind raced. What plan? My heart sank deeper with each passing second. "Are you sure this is the right move?" Jake asked, his tone shifting slightly, revealing a hint of concern. "What if she finds out?" "She won't," Mark assured him, confidence radiating from him like an aura. "She's too wrapped up in her feelings. Besides, I've got everything under control. Just keep playing your part." I felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath me. A chilling realization washed over me. They were talking about me, about my feelings, about my relationship with Jake. All the moments we had shared, the stolen glances, the secret conversations. It had all been a game to them. My stomach churned, and I took a shaky step back, my heart racing with betrayal. Suddenly, I felt a wave of anger surge through me, mixing with the hurt that had already settled in my chest. I had to confront them, to unearth the truth, no matter how painful it was. I stormed into the living room, my emotions bubbling over. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice unwavering despite the turmoil inside me. Both men looked up, surprise etched on their faces. Mark quickly masked his expression with a smirk, while Jake's eyes widened in shock. "Sarah, Mark began, but I cut him off. "Don't give me that. I heard everything. You were both using me. What kind of sick game is this?" I felt the tears pricking at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at Mark for guidance. "Sarah, it's not what it sounds like." "Then what is it?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Because it sounds like you both have been playing me for fools. I trusted you, Jake. I trusted you both." Mark stood up, trying to approach me, but I held my ground. "Stay back. I can't believe you would manipulate my feelings like this, Mark. You knew about everything, didn't you?" Mark's face twisted with a mixture of guilt and defiance. "I did it to protect you. You were so lost, Sarah. I thought if I let you explore those feelings, you'd see it was just a phase." "A phase?" I echoed, incredulous. "You think my feelings are just a phase? And you, Jake? Were you just playing the role of the supportive friend?" Jake's eyes shifted from me to Mark, uncertainty flickering across his face. "I didn't mean for things to go this far." I shook my head, feeling utterly betrayed. "You both took advantage of me. I don't even know who to trust anymore." The room felt like it was closing in on me, and I turned to leave, desperate for air, desperate to escape the suffocating reality of their betrayal. As I reached for the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. An unknown number flashed back at me, and I felt a jolt of unease. The message read, "You have no idea what's really happening. They've both betrayed you. You need to know the truth." I froze, my heart racing anew, the weight of betrayal now compounded by a new threat. Turning back to face both men, I felt the ground shift beneath me once more. "What is this? What else aren't you telling me?" But all I received were blank stares, and as I walked away from everything I thought I knew, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing at a crossroads, unsure of where to turn next.